Many examples of how this works out. When someone is accused of sexually molesting a child and the man says, I'm a normal, happily married man. What he's saying is, I don't deny the sexual molestation, but I want you to think I couldn't have done it because I'm married. We're married people, still sexually abuse children. So when the word normal is used, it's an indication, and any word near that, normal, usual, regular, when it is used, it means the person is thinking of something unusual, abnormal, not the norm, while they're speaking, and they're trying to deceive. So here she's revealing a knowledge, if we're listening to her, that this day was, what they went through, that routine, was not normal.
Okay.
I also, before we leave this last quote, we have, she just cuddled on my knee, and we read a story, and we also had some treats. The word we is used to connect people. It's a very powerful pronoun. It often uses, speaks of unity, and we do not hear the word we between a murderer and a victim. It's very unusual. What this suggests, along with the word cuddled, is something different. The word cuddled, that's what 3-year-olds do. It's unnecessary to tell us that. It is persuasive language. She's trying to portray something as being very close, very normal, telling us that something wasn't normal about it. But the word we suggests something to consider, that what happened to Madeline that night may not have been intentional. And so I am a slave to the statement. The words must guide me, and no matter what my opinion may be, what I do now is I have indication within the language that there is no concern for Madeline, which we'll explore, that Madeline is not alive at this point, and that they are concealing information about what happened to Madeline, but thus far, this is not premeditated. This is someone who had a boundary set up in the family, and the ties that bind them together here produce the word we.
When you say that night, right, the night that something happened, if it happened, are you convinced that it's the night that they said, or do you think it could have been a different night, a previous night?
Oh, it could be the previous night. This could
or previous, not necessarily the date they've said.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because usual is given. Usual is given. What she could be talking about is patterns. Speaking of patterns, if this child was given something to make her sleep, it wouldn't have been the first time. And that's what that could suggest.
If you've watched my final film, a lot of people think that they spent 3 days or so before they announced to the public that Madeline had gone missing, that they spent some time planning it. That's a well, it's all covered in my final film, basically. But what we looked at was, we went back in time from the point where they alerted the police to try and find evidence of her being alive in photographs and all kinds of things. So there is a school of thought that she died on the 29th of April, which was 3 days before they even reported her missing. So I don't know, have you not watched that final film?
I haven't yet.
Right, okay. All right.
Right now it's not supported by the language, but the reason I mention it is because what I do is I have to be open to anything that comes in, and what I'll say is the language will affirm that, the language will deny that, or the language won't address it. It's called a temporal lacunae, a jump over in time, and at this point I don't see a deliberate attempt to jump time.
Okay.
And if it comes up later, I'll grab it, but I don't see it at this point.
All right.
At 9 p.m, Jerry checked on Madeline and the twins.
I actually stuck my head round the door and I just lingered for a few seconds and thought how beautiful she was. And that's the last time I saw her.
This is very concerning. This is a statement that bothers me a great deal. First of all, he begins with the pronoun I, which means psychologically he's putting himself there. This is good. We want him to be there. We want to have reliable information. But the next word is actually. The word actually means he's comparing what he's claiming to do with something else. Why would that be necessary at this point? Then I'd actually stuck my head around the door, and I just lingered for a few seconds and thought how beautiful she was, and that was the last time I saw her. At this point, his child is missing, not dead, according to their narrative. Even though he's referencing a specific night, is Madeline no longer beautiful? And what I ask the viewers is to consider that when you give a detail of a past tense event, the detail should be in the past tense appropriately. When you speak about character or ongoing characteristics of a missing child, it should be present tense. And I thought, how beautiful she is. And that's the last time I saw her. That would be more acceptable. This is a past tense reference to Madeline herself, not specifically bound up to a detail, but actually, was she only beautiful that night? That's what I mean by an attribute. So when someone uses an attribute of a missing child in the past tense, it's not a good signal. Right. It's not a good signal at all. Now, he also stuttered with the pronoun I. So what we look for is that, does he normally stutter? And he doesn't. He's not a stutterer. The pronoun I is something that we in the English language use millions of times. We are as good at using the pronoun I as we could be as good at anything in this life. When someone stutters on the pronoun I, there is an increase in tension and anxiety. And this stutter bothers me here. And it's important. He's talking about his daughter in the context she's still missing. So while the several things are wrong, he gives a narrative or an emotion. He references her beauty, which should be ongoing, and it's not. And he stutters on the pronoun I, and I still wait to hear concern for what Madeline is going through while this interview is being conducted. And that's going to be a bigger point as we move forward.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The last time someone sees a missing child is always going to be important.
Right.
This may sound a bit strange, but I believe him. I believe that the last time he saw her, he did linger. And he did think about how beautiful she was. I think this is where she was disposed of. And I'll build this theme as we go along.
All right.
The last time you saw her, you thought how lucky you were.
Exactly.
And that bothered me because that's very poor interviewing. That's why we train journalists to not teach someone how to lie. Because the problem with that is, he did not think about how lucky he was unless something was wrong. And that's, I can't say that he thought how lucky I was. He only affirms it from what the interviewer said. The interviewer should not have said such a thing. The interviewer is speaking as if the interviewer believes the child is dead. If you have no guilty knowledge of your missing child and you leave the child to go to dinner, you're not going to have that type of nostalgic thoughts. You're just going to dinner and, we'll miss her, we'll be back in shortly and everything will be fine. You don't have those type of thoughts. Having those type of thoughts is an indication of guilty knowledge that Madeline's gone.
Your world shattered within an hour.
We now have a period of time, and we also have a case of distancing language where he didn't say, my world is shattered. If my daughter was missing, my world is shattered. Not your world, not someone else's world, not everyone's world, because everyone experiences this universally. My world is shattered. I'm the father. What's going on with Madeline right now? No concern. What I'm building towards is this. There's a reason why the McCanns do not show any concern over what Madeline's experiencing right now. They're intelligent people. They're no dummies here. They're intelligent people. They're not concerned. Parents are forever concerned because even Stephen King said, the terrors that a parent's mind can conjure up in wondering what my children are going through is more horrible than anything he could write. Mm-hmm. Our imaginations double down on us when we try to sleep, worrying about every little slip, every little fall of our children go through. They have shown no concern in the most extreme of circumstances. Why not? And they're going to answer that question for me. So Jerry, as a biological father, is telling us that his world isn't shattered. Your world is. That's distancing language.
At 10 p.m, it was Kate's turn to look in on the kids.
At that point, I expect to hear, I got there and Madeline was gone. That's, it's not a discovery. It is a traumatic, personal, up-close personal, extreme event that puts hormone levels so high that if they don't recede quickly, there's going to be PTSD. In other words, the hormonal response of finding your child missing is going to be so extreme that in a few moments, you're not going to be able to reason the emotions down, the hormones down. If you're driving your car, and as you're driving, someone cuts you off, and you grab your wheel, and you can feel the flush of hormones. You feel it physically. It's a physiological reaction. You say to yourself, I'm okay, and your hands begin to loosen. The blood goes back towards the blood flow that initially went out to protect you, and the hormones recede in just a few moments, maybe a second or two, maybe even less than a second. If that hormonal response were to stay elevated for more than a few seconds, it is very likely that 30 years from now you're going to wake up screaming because the brain has an imprint on it. If you walk through the door and found your child missing, the hormonal response is so extreme and there's no reasoning it down, that parent will suffer for the rest of the parent's life, even if the child is found safely a week later. 30 years later, the parent will still wake up screaming because the imprint on the brain, the inability for the brain to process the most powerful of human emotions, of mother-child bonding, it can't happen properly. And so we can mitigate it by trying to get them to process it. Journaling is very helpful, but it is so intense. And that's why the vividness is so powerful. And it's physiological. When you're under attack, when something like that happens, your pupils will dilate, you go on high alert, blood will flow to and from certain parts of your body, your legs will become stronger so you can run. The blood goes away from the internal organs so that if you're knifed, you have a better chance of surviving. The hairs, people say the hair on the back of my neck stood up. It's actually true. Piloerection it's called. It is some kind of built-in mechanism to make us look bigger and stronger. Those are the type of reactions that you will have if you find, or I will have, if I find my child being missing. She tells us I had that type of reaction with the conclusion that everything was normal. You can't have it both ways. This is a disconnect that means she's not speaking from experiential memory. She's using certain points of the account, stitching it together in an overall deceptive account.
The bedroom door where the 3 children were sleeping was open much further than we'd left it. I went to close it to about here, and then as I got to here, it suddenly slammed. And then as I opened it, it was then that I just thought, I'll just look at the children. And literally as I went back in, the curtains of the bedroom, which were drawn, were closed. It was like a gust of wind, kind of just blew them open.
This is not a sophisticated liar. This is a silly story where my child is missing and I'm talking about the curtains and blowing and all sorts of emotions. That's where someone who is a police officer, even without terrific training, will say, storytelling. This is storytelling. Well, we call it narrative building, and what she's doing is she's giving the inclusion of emotions, besides many other indicators of problems within the house, including the door. The bedroom door where the three children, not my kids, that's distancing language there, were sleeping, was open much further than I'd left it. That's not what she says. We left it. Does that mean that she and her husband each took a hand and moved the door to a certain level together? Because that's what she wants me to believe. She's lying. This is deception. The fact that she's using door for deception is because she's building a narrative about a kidnapping. The need to build a narrative about kidnapping says the child wasn't kidnapped. That plainly. And literally, as I went back in, the curtains of the bedroom, which were drawn, were closed. It was like a gust of wind blew upon them. She's asking you to enter into an emotional, fictitious account. This is the writing of fiction. This is something that even Statement Analysis 101 would be able to grab on. So I conclude here, deception indicated from this alone.
And you mentioned here again, doors and windows are often found within language of sexual abuse.
Yeah, I'm concerned.
Right.
I'm concerned. This is not a normal family. There are verbal indicators, and it doesn't necessarily mean that Madeline was a victim of sexual abuse. What it could be is in the language of Kate that she was sexually abused while she was growing up. This would leave her vulnerable for things such as neglect. And if you take that to the next step, someone that has been sexually abused in childhood who is now vulnerable to neglecting her own children, possibly even failure to protect, if someone else like her husband was involved in sexual abuse, we would find the need to persuade us, I'm a great mom. We were cuddling. Okay? The reason I indicated deception with that statement about cuddling is because whenever someone says, we call it the I love you factor. I kissed my kids, told them I loved them, and went to bed. Everyone kisses their kids and says, I love you, go to bed. When you see that in a criminal statement, they're telling you something is really wrong between me and the kids. So her need to persuade about the cuddling, if you consider it carefully, you must be open to the fact that she may have been holding a lifeless body and has a need to persuade, no, this was cuddling.
Okay.
This answer, by the way, was one of the most important answers because here we were able to look at the larger measurement of the statement of what happened as she gets into it. And this is a very lengthy introduction. She's not getting to the point of telling us that Madeline is missing and what must she be going through. She is narrative building even if we just measured it with the scientific measurement of our formula of 25% introduction, 50% content, 25% afterwards, she is heavily delaying getting to the point and giving lots of unnecessary details. Where do we have more detail? On what Madeline is going through or on the windows?
And the curtains, which had been closed, just swung open into the room and revealed that the shutter was all the way up and the window being pushed right across. And then I just knew she'd been taken.
Right. She goes to a conclusion of the matter and she goes into present tense language. This is an intelligent woman. She knows how to use verb tenses. When someone is committed to something that happened, I came to the building, not I come to the building. Well, here we have a continued description about the curtains, which is concerning to me, just swung open into the room and reveal that the shutter was all the way up. So if we want to believe what she's going to say is that the reason that she knows that someone had been taken her is because she walked into the room and the room just magically opened itself up and said, look at the evidence. She's lying.
Okay.
This tells us Madeline was not kidnapped.
Okay.
Kate says after a quick, frantic search of the apartment, she ran back towards Jerry, who was still with their friends at the table by the pool.
I can't remember exactly where the table was. It's kind of in this bit, so it'd be about round here. and I was kind of sitting in this bit. Yeah, I mean, Kate's clearly distraught, and I jumped up, but it was kind of disbelief. She can't be gone. She can't possibly. How could she be gone? And I was saying that to Kate as we were both running.
Deception indicated, and here's why. First of all, we have him making an assertion. I know where the table was. I know exactly where the table was. So he's giving us an indication, I am on high alert, the same what she had done before. And then, with this precise language, he immediately moves away from it.